I have a second channel on YouTube called Quill18 Creates where I do programming tutorials. There's a Patreon page to support that, and one of the levels in there is that I do a programming live stream from time to time. So the programming content is taking over our regular Saturday stream for a tutorial. It'll probably take about an hour, after which we'll be playing some Kerbal Space Program. And today we're going to be looking at some fun tricks for platformer design. First of all, so I set up a little bit of a dummy scene over here, which we can talk about. The script that's controlling our little ninja here is actually from an open source 2D platformer controller that is available on GitHub. It's very great for quick start. I mean, it's not super hard to build yourself a 2D a controller for like a 2D platformer character. That wasn't going to be the emphasis of this, so I'm like, you know what, let's just go ahead and grab that, and it's going to be fine. I brought in some of the great art assets from the classic, like the Kini NL art pack here. So that's the sort of the tiles underneath our feet, the question box, or the exclamation box, not a question mark, of course, and the coins as well. So those graphics are all from there. Just very, very, very common, very generously licensed artwork packs and various things like that. I think the Kini art is all like CC0 or something like that, Creative Commons. So that's going to be great. So that's cool. And so setting up a platformer is one thing, right? Getting the physics moving around and the activatables. I mean, the coins. Are you hearing the coin noise? I mean, there's no noise, but can you hear it in your mind? Bing, 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 whenever I pick it up. And then, I don't know, the block doesn't do anything, but that wouldn't be hard to put in. But the level design is kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. Unity, in the next version of Unity, there will be a lot more tools added in for working with tile maps and cooler sprite things, including like automatically putting like the right kind of sprite for like the edge of, you know, these things as opposed to middle ones. It's going to have all these great tools for that. I'm really excited for the 9-sliced sprite tool, which I've been waiting for forever, because they introduced 9-slicing in their UI system, which is fantastic. But oh, link in the description for YouTube video. Yes, on YouTube there will be a link for the downloads for the character controller as well as this. And I think if you do the what game, I think in here there's a link to the platformer controller. There we go. So if you're in Twitch chat, you can just follow that link for the platformer controller, and it's a really nice and easy way to get started. One thing I will say, like writing your own platformer controller isn't that hard unless you want to introduce things like, you know, this guy can he can double jump. He can also do the wall grip and then into a wall slide after a little while. And then he can also wall jump. And, you know, adding more and more of those things gets a little bit complicated and you know, standing on a platform and whatever. But the basics of it aren't too bad. I will say this. A lot of people try, as their first pass, to use the physics system to run their character around. You know, the rigid body and a collider box and then you know, and then they just apply some sort of velocity to their character. Yeah, not really recommended. You're gonna, it's way too twitchy. It's not what a physics system is designed for. And the problem is, like, your characters in the platformer don't really obey just standard physics. In fact, they tend to break a lot of rules and do weird things, and they slide around the ground in a completely different way. So it's not recommended. You should just write your own thing that is not physics dependent, that uses, you know, its own. I mean, you can still use collision boxes to check if you're hitting the ground, ray casts, all those things, of course, but don't just use like a generic rigid body for that. So anyway, so that part is all okay, but let's say we want to design this map. So then I've got these blocks. So I guess I want to copy one and then move it over here. And I mean, you can hold shift to force it to only go on one axis. And if you hold V, it'll snap to vertices, although then you do have to adjust the grid side a little bit. So like, how do you get it to be exactly where you want? Copy, paste, right? If I go here and it's like, oh, I want it to be there. And okay, now I've got to do more of them. And oh, it's awful. So what you can do is you can design your own level editor tool, which is, I mean, you know, if you're doing a big grandiose game, it's worth investing the time to build your own level design tools. And again, Unity will have tools to make it a little bit better going forward, but it's not that great. And let's say you're trying to make something that's actually relatively simple, or you're trying to work on something for maybe a game jam or something like that. You don't have time to build a level editor, and placing all these blocks is going to be a huge pain in the butt. So you know what you do instead? You use a tool that's really good at just putting stuff on screen, and that is a painting program. Something like Photoshop or GIMP or Paint.net or anything like that. Anything that can draw graphics, that would work. And what we're going to do, is each one of these blocks, based on their color, is going to get mapped to a particular object in Unity. Unity, we're going to have it load this image, go through it pixel by pixel, and anywhere that there's a colored pixel, it's going to go and spawn a game object based on sort of a dictionary lookup table kind of a thing. So you can already see it's like, okay, so let's say these black squares here are just your regular blocks or whatever. If you're making a Mario game, right? So you've got your regular blocks are these, and then these blue ones, those will be our exclamation mark boxes, right? The blue ones you can hit. And then the yellow bits, those are going to be my coins. And I've got a red bit over here that's going to be an enemy. And so the idea is, like, this is a lot easier to work with, right? You grab your pencil tool, you go there, and you're like, oh, I want some new blocks over here. I want to put up I want a little jumping puzzle. It's kind of crappily drawn. So, you know, not a jumping puzzle, but I want you to have to do a bunch of jumps over here so that you can get a box on top of there. Let me grab my eyedropper. There we go. And there's going to be a box on here with, you know, a 1-up or something like that. Boom, done. Not only that, but these other boxes, which are part of the video I did over there, is like you can use, you know, you can use this. You can quickly fill an area, right? Like that. You can use the drawing tools, you know, like this line tool. Really, we're using it to draw a rectangle to do that sort of thing. Very, very easy to do that. It's also really easy to let a total non-programmer do your level design. All they have to do is paint something, which is very cool. And you just have basically a chart of what the colors represent. And if you've got a relatively simple platformer, just a few colors are needed. If you do want to do a little bit more complexity, like this red one is supposed to be like a monster or an enemy or something like that, I've got it set to just like pure red, 255 red, 00 green and blue. But again, if you're doing sort of a Mario clone, what you could do is then have this be a little index where 0 is a Koopa Troopa, 1 is a Hammer Brothers, 2 is a Boo, 3 is a Thwomp, or, you know, some damn thing like that. And so just by slightly using the colors as a flag to indicate what kind of opponents might be there, you know, different colored turtles, that sort of thing, right? So you can imagine that sort of scenario very, very easily. Same thing with the blocks. Like we're using, well, I was going to say blue. This is more, is it a little more purplish? No, it's pure blue. It just looks a little weird on my monitor. And the same thing, you know, you say, so full blue is an item box, and normally it's just a random one, but we can do something like set a bit here to say this has a coin, this one here has a mushroom, this one here has a 1-up, this one here is a fire flower, etc., etc., etc. And this is not very different from how a lot of the old school platformers work, but it's also really, 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 really fast to design a level, and actually reading this is going to be really, really easy for us. So it's not too bad. The one thing that you can't do with this is if for some reason there's supposed to be 2 things in one tile. I can't imagine why that would ever happen, but that would be the one limitation. But there's no reason you also can't combine this with another data file, right? Maybe this is just your tile information, and you have some other tile or some other file that's a list of monster positions. Maybe it's just an XML file with like monster name, XY position. That might be a lot more relevant because you can also use this for those old school sort of RPGs overworld map, right? So instead of visualizing this as a platformer, imagine that what we're drawing are rooms and corridors and hallways for a dungeon or something like that. In which case, you know, you could still use the little colored things for where NPCs are, but you might use another data file or some other thing like that. One thing to note, what we're going to do here is we're going to read in this whole file probably in one go, because we're on modern computers and we can probably load that all in. But if you're targeting mobile devices, or if you have really big levels, or if you're, I don't know, really trying to simulate what life was like in the, you know, old NES days where you had like no memory and no processor or anything like that, you wouldn't actually read all this in ahead of time. What was happening is as Mario walked along and he moved forward 1 block, and, you know, the screen was sort of moving, then the program basically read the next column. It was reading in 1 column at a time and eliminating the stuff from the columns behind you. Hey, Lorth, thanks for the resub and the 1-year Twitch anniversary. So you can do that, which really, reduces the initial load time, but also if you find that the performance is kind of fading because your level is too big, because there's too much stuff going on, that's kind of relevant. This also applies to your enemies, right? In Mario, if there's like a turtle in a particular place, well, if it's off screen and Mario's not moving, the turtle isn't moving. It doesn't really start moving because it doesn't really exist until you get close enough for it to sort of spawn in. So, or to be read in. So that's the sort of stuff we're going to be working with here. So I've got that saved, and I've got Unity up over here, and I've got our file over here. So I'm just going to see if I can address any questions. Sam3for1 is going to go to bed. Good night, Sam3for1. Hope you have some good rest. Researchers discovered we see in hexes. Pixels is the best movie ever. You know, Pixels, it was interesting. It seemed... like, to me, I assumed it was going to be crap. And a lot of people responded to it as like, oh, it's kind of crap at the time. I ended up watching it on a flight some time ago, and it wasn't great, but it actually was much better than I expected. It really did feel like sort of like a love letter to video games. And, you know, so that's sort of like geek fantasy of being in video games. Like, that's fine. It was good fun. Johnny, thank you very much. Johnny number 5 for the resub. So, oh, Nicholas the Greek, your stream's not loading for you. Oh, no. All right, I think we're good. We're gonna continue. So, we've got this image, and there's a few gotchas, right? Like, first of all, if you're working in 2D in Unity, by default, when you bring in an image, it should, by default, try to import it as a sprite. Now, a sprite is just a texture with certain assumptions made about how Unity should import the image. And it's basically, it's the same as if you went, say, advanced over here, where you've got all this manual settings. It's the same as that, except with Sprite, it assumes certain things about the settings, and it also brings in more information and actually creates this sort of Sprite prefab, which is this little sub bit over here. And you can also use the Sprite Editor to sort of trim this down if you need to, or you can even flag it as, multiple sprites over here, which if you then apply in the Sprite Editor, you can draw out multiple sprites. And if you were to apply this, again, it would create multiple of these little sprite instances for you. So Sprite is just like an extra wrapper around your regular textures. But our level is not going to be a sprite at all. We're never going to just take this level. Let me go to single mode over here. We're never just going to take this level and drop it into our world. That's never going to happen. We're not using it for that. Instead, we simply need to be able to read the pixels. And so the best way to do that, hey Wolfgang, is we're just going to treat it as normal texture. But we can't just use the regular texture variant because there's a button we need to click that is only on the advanced mode. And the button we need to click is read write enabled. You need to hit this button so that you can read or even change the pixels in your texture at runtime. I'm not sure what it means to have it off. I assume internally Unity is doing some sort of optimization on the image because it's like, oh, no one's ever going to change these pixels. Great, so we can, I don't know, just stuff it into graphic card memory or something like that. But we need to turn this button on so that we can actually read the pixels in. And that's fine. And again, we're never going to show this on screen. Although it's worth noting, what you could do, if you're artsy, unlike me, is you could easily imagine the situation where you've got this great as a front layer, but you use this map that you've drawn and you create some other layer in the background, which you then, paint your pretty stuff on. Obviously, it's not going to make much sense here because we're in a different pixel mode, but you could have like a really pretty matte painting in the back just by taking this, blowing it up to, really high resolution and then painting behind it or something of that nature, which we're not doing here. So that's the first thing. The other thing is we don't need mipmaps. So we can actually save ourselves a little bit of memory by getting rid of that. Filter mode would default to bilinear. I said at the point, I don't want any filtering. I think it's a moot point here. But what we're really trying to do is limit any sort of messing about with our picture. And one of the things actually is the compression. I think the default setting would have been automatic compressed over here. And when an image is compressed, I mean, you guys know from Jpegs and things like that, hey, Colton Crows, sometimes you lose a little bit of detail. Now, this might be compressing it, losslessly or not. It might be mapping it to a color map or not. But the important thing is it's possible that in the compression, some of your colors will change slightly. Or some of your sharp borders might get a little bit fuzzy. And we need to read in exactly the color values that we put in Photoshop here. We need to know that, the pixel with 255 red and 3 blue is our boo. or whatever kind of monster it is. So it's important that it actually doesn't get compressed or messed about. Test different things and see. I'm going to go with automatic true color, which actually in our case would actually end up with, I believe, RGBA 32-bit. But you don't want compression. You also don't want it to get shrunk down from the size. So you could always just set the max size to like 8K. I mean, that's not going to make a difference because in this case, our image is just 128 by 32. This is actually a really small image. If I go and take this and shrink it down to 100%, there. That's the size of our image. It's tiny. It's microscopic, which is why it's actually going to be quite fast to read. It could be in any size as well. If you want a taller level or whatever, you can make your graphic whatever size you want. I just did it like this because I think that's going to be sufficient. Coltang Crows, thank you very much for the resub. So we got that. I think all the settings are where I want it. So we've got this sort of dummy level here. I'm going to go and delete. Actually, you know what? I'm going to keep this scene, and I'll create a new scene called, I don't know, scene loaded from image. There. I like to do this in my scene names. It makes it super obvious what is going on. I can get rid of that coin script, actually. I think I just double-clicked on it, so MonoDevelop is going to open. So this scene here, I'm going to go back to my original scene, and I'm going to call this my ninja, or player ninja over here. I'm going to create a new prefab, just so that I've got it. Go scene loaded from image, save the old scene, and we're just going to drop the player ninja in there. Okay, so we've got that. If we hit player ninja will just fall, whee, and die. Actually, that reminds me. Do I have a pixel for the player ninja? And I don't think I do. So let's get a purely green color. There we go. Because that's going to be the starting point. So I'm going to drop them, say, here. That's going to be where our player spawns. Right there. And actually, our player will need probably the camera attached to him. I mean, really, it should be a camera follow. Let's just leave the camera where it is, and that's going to be okay. All right, so we won't even start the player in the world. We're going to have to spawn him when we find, oh, the green pixel. We just got a big tip in from YukoFin. Thank you very much, Yuko. Hey, Quill, just started my 4-week holiday, and that's why some whiskey and chocolate. 4-week holiday. Now, Finn, is that like Finnish? Do you have like the big summer holidays like all of Scandinavia seems to take? I think so. Why aren't I using Visual Studio instead of MonoDevelop? The reason is, imagine this. I'm trying to do tutorials. So every time I make a tutorial in Unity, one person tends to ask why I use MonoDevelop. If I use Visual Studio, how many dozens of people would be like, what are you using to edit that? How do I get that? How do I configure it? I'm confused. Your user interface isn't the same. Your hotkeys aren't the same. You're using a different find and replace than I'm using, etc., etc., etc. I'm using MonoDevelop because it's the one that's built in, and therefore that makes it better for tutorials. So I'm not going to argue that Visual Studio is not really good, but for making the tutorials, it makes more sense for me to use that. Okay, so we got that. What we're going to do is we're going to create an empty game object here, and this is going to be called, I don't know, the level. I don't know. And we're going to add a script. We're going to create a script called level loader. I don't know. Seems fine. Level loader. So we're going to create this new script. And this is going to need a couple of things. First of all, it's going to need the texture 2D, which is our level map. Then it's going to need, so that's going to create in our inspector over here. There we go. A field so that we can say, here's your level. It's level 1-1. This could be an array of level things, you know, when you could have a color, right, that in here, say, you know, some other color over here, which is the endpoint. If the character walks into this, this is a big trigger. If you walk into here, then that's the end of the level. So you play a little animation, and then you load the next one in the series. Either one. So, you know, we could have it be an array. We're just going to have it be one thing right now, because it's going to be fine. And then what we're going to need is we're going to need the map. So let's make a class here. Public class. This is going to be color to object. Color to prefab. And what this is going to have a public color. I'm going to use color 32. The difference between color and color 32 is that the color class defines its colors this way. Let me just comment this out so that we're not in error. Okay, so I can make a color C is equal to new color, and this requires floats. So if you want something that is red, you have a 1.0 in the red column and a 0 and a 0 in the green and blue. And then of course you can have the alpha as well, which defaults to 1. So but you could also put it in there. So that would be a fully red pixel. With color 32, C32 is equal to new color 32. And what it wants is 3 bytes, or numbers that go from 0 to 255. So if you want pure red here, you go 255, 0, 0, and we want it full alpha. So it'd be this. These two would both be exactly the same red color. And the difference between the two is, from your point of view, is mostly, am I working with floats that go from 1 to 0, or from 0 to 1, or am I working with bytes that go from 0 to 255? There are a lot of situations where if you're trying to do pixel manipulation, the second one is faster. Because let's say we've got our level map and we can get pixels. This has 2 variants. There's get pixel singular gets you a single pixel. It just returns a color. Because I don't think there's a get pixel 32. No, there's no get pixel 32. But that get pixel gets you 1 pixel. That's very slow unless you're just trying to get one thing. Usually what you end up working with is get pixels, which will return an array. If you don't specify anything, it'll just return all of your pixels. All my pixels, like that. Okay? And you can make a change. You can say, I want to change the pixel, the 4th pixel. Whoops. I want to change this to be my red color. I want to set it to red. And then if you want to, doing this is a copy of the pixels. If you want to set it, then you go level map dot set pixels, and you feed those back in. There you go. So you have done that. The problem is that internally, the pixels themselves are actually represented by bytes. And so when you get pixels here, it has to convert from bytes to floats. Then you set them. And then when you set pixels again, it converts from floats to bytes. Technically, this is a little bit slower. Not usually a big problem, but it technically is. Whereas what is faster is doing exactly the same thing, but fun little glitch there. Get pixels 32, colors 32, 32. So all my pixels 4 is equal to the 32-bit version, and then we set pixels 32, 32. Technically, this is slightly faster because it's 1 fewer conversions behind the scenes. More importantly for us, though, we are working with great precision. Again, when we want to know that an enemy is 255 red and a blue of exactly 4, then that's our boo or a red Koopa Trooper or whatever it's supposed to be. You can't really get that precision with floats. So we have to work with the 32-bit versions of those. But very interesting. If you are doing a lot of pixel manipulation, then you probably want to do it color 32 to be a wee bit faster. Do keep in mind that regardless, iterating through all the pixels in a texture every frame is always going to be pretty slow. And if you're doing anything like that, odds are you probably want to do it with a shader. But that was our previous tutorial, maybe 2 tutorials ago. So we're making this little extra helper class, which is going to have a public color 32. This is going to be the color, I guess. And it's going to have a public game object prefab, like this. All right. And what we're going to have here is a public array of color to prefab, like that. Yeah. So if we go back into Unity and check the inspector, or do we have to have it be a list? I think I have to have it be a list, because I don't think I need this to be serializable. Maybe I do. I'm trying to do a thing. Aha! There we go. All right. So, because this class is not derived from mono behavior, by default, it's not marked as serializable. By adding this little tag, it means that Unity is allowed to save and load these things using its internal system, which is awesome. So now, on our level loader, in addition to being able to specify the level map, we have access to this color to prefab array. So we can say something like, I don't know, we've got about 10 things in here, 10 different types of elements which map from one to the other. So a purely black pixel, 0, 0, 0, 0, is going to link to, this is going to be our regular, oh, I need the prefabs. These are going to be our regular grass tiles over there. So when we read our graphic in, if we hit a black pixel, we're going to spawn a grass box. If we hit a, well, we can get these values, right? Next thing would be the item blocks, which is, if you recall, this pure blue value over here. It's also handy that you can get the hex code over here, which I think we can even paste into Unity, which saves you from a little bit of manual editing. Yeah, right over here, the hex code, just like that. So if we hit blue, then we know this is supposed to be an item box. What's our next color? Our next color is yellow over here. So we're going to grab this, and again, I'll copy the hex code. Whoops. And in here, we'll just paste it in. So yellow is going to be a coin. Excellent. What else we have? So we have green over here. And right, we can leave this box open, which is going to be fine. So green is going to be where we spawn our player. And red is going to be an enemy. That's the last color we have left. And that's just pure red is what we have it set to right now. So that's going to be fine. And I don't actually have an enemy. So I guess I'll make, let me drop this in here as a prefab, which isn't going to do anything. It's just going to be technically visible, and that's going to be fine. So I'm going to call that a, there we go, snail, enemy snail. Snail. How do you spell snail? Oh, get rid of the old one. And so if we run into red, then we're going to spawn this snail, which currently isn't going to do anything, but that's okay. All right, so there we go. So we can actually trim this down and say there's actually only 5 elements in our map. There we are. So now we have something that's got a color and a prefab attached to it. So now this is not really the best way to do the map, but let's just pretend for now. So when we start, what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to make a helper function, and we don't need an update. Irrelevant. I'm going to make another function called load map. So first of all, actually, we're going to have another function called empty map. Find all of our children and ... eliminate them. So basically, when we load in the map, I'm gonna, everything that I instantiate, I'm gonna make a child of this object, and then when we want to clear it, when we want to reset it, we're just going to do that. So we'll just do a little one of these to clean things up well. So int I, and it's going to be based on our transform dot actually, it's not that. We don't need to loop with a for loop. We can just say while transform dot child count is greater than 0. Then we are going to get our child, transform dot get child, get the first one, and then we're going to say we're going to destroy c.gameObject. There we go. So that will delete the object. However, if we run this as is, we will get an infinite loop. Why is that? Objects only get destroyed at the end of the update, at the end of the current frame. They actually persist in Unity until the end of the frame. So therefore, we will always have, even if we start off with just one child, we'll say transform.child count is greater than 0. Yeah, we have a child. Good. So we get the child, we destroy it, and then we go again and we say, hey, is our child count greater than 0? Well, yeah, it still is. The object is flagged that it's supposed to get destroyed, but it's not going to get destroyed yet. So it's important to become Batman, which is a joke I'm never, ever, ever going to stop making. And just even though this works, logically it feels like you should do this first. Become the Joker. So first you become the Batman by having no parent, and then you destroy the Batman. So you become the Joker. All right, so there you go. So this is going to be our command to empty the map. So before we load a map, we're going to empty a map. And on start, we're going to load map like that. Okay, so now what do we do? Yay, it's funny. Okay, now what do we do? we are going to get all the pixels, get the raw pixels from the level image map, which we can do very easily, right? We have a level map. We can say color 32. We're getting an array of this. Just all pixels. So we get that from our level map dot get pixels, the 32-bit version, and there we go. We also need, and we could reference this, but it'll be easier if we say something like width, level map dot width, and I guess we probably need to know the height as well because of our loop. So now, and this is the part that could be a little bit slow if you had a really big image, but it's not going to be that big. So we're going to do a for loop. We're going to loop. This is going to be in the x direction while it's less than width. And then we're going to have another one. By the way, if you type 4 and you just hit tab twice, it auto-completes this for you, which is great. We're going to loop in the y direction, tab over, height, hit enter, and then enter again. Super handy. So we're going to loop this way. So the outer loop is going to be in x, the inner loop is going to be y. It doesn't actually matter, but technically, so we're going to go from the bottom up, then over one, bottom up, then over one, bottom up, and so on and so forth. So then we need to figure out what is what. So something like, I mean, if all pixels dot are, what is the current pixel index? So we have to remember, this is a single dimensional array. So how do we map? People were really confused about this in something else I did recently. I can't remember. I got an email and someone was confused about it, or maybe it was on Twitter. Is how do we go? All pixels is an array that is one dimensional. But obviously we've got this sort of two-dimensional idea. So how do you find the right place? Well, let's assume we were just looking at the first row of the image, then x, right? The xth pixel is the xth row in normal thing, or the xth column. But how do we get the correct row? Well, we do that by adding in y multiplied by width, right? So imagine our image is 100 pixels wide, and we want the third row from the bottom, because again, everything is from the bottom in an image. So third row from the bottom would be, the first row would start at number 0, the second row would start at number 100, the third row would start at number 200. So the y coordinate, so the third row again is y equals 2, the y coordinate multiplied by the width of 100, y times 100, or so 2 times 100 be 200, and then you offset it by some amount of distance in the x. And that's what we get here. Most people, I think, probably end up writing it more like this. There we go. So something like that. Actually, we're not even going to wrap this in if. What I'm going to do is get a little helper function here. We're going to say something like void spawn tile at. And we're going to pass it a color, 32, and an x coordinate, and an int and a y coordinate like this. So what I'm going to do is from here, we're just going to call spawn tile at. We're going to pass it the color, and we're going to pass it the x and the y. And that's it. We're going to do one loop at a time. And then what we're going to do, so what we're going to do here is find the right color. I'll spell it this way because just internally that's how colors are referred, in our map. This is a place where we could optimize things, because what we're going to be doing is just looping. Actually, we could do a for each. For each, what do I call this? Color to prefab CTP in color to prefab. Do this. Note, this isn't optimized. You should have a dictionary lookup for max speed. But it's been good enough because we have a relatively small array. So that's going to be fine. So we're going to loop through each of our color to prefab. And if ctp.color is the same as C, spawn the prefab at the right location. So So what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate a new game object. So we're going to instantiate the prefab. It needs a position, and this has to be a vector 3. So we make a new vector 3. Well, I mean, I guess it could be a vector 2, but let's just do the vector 3. At the x and y, and for the z axis, we're going to put in a 0. And if we specify a position, who was that with the resub? Tracy Blue, thank you very much for the resub. 30 months in a row, thank you very much. For the orientation, so if you specify a position, you need to specify a rotation, which is okay. We're just going to say the identity rotation. So in other words, no rotation whatsoever. So that's going to instantiate new object. Instantiate, hey, White Raven Knight, thank you very much for the resub. Instantiate returns a generic object type, so we're going to cast it to game object, which is what it is, incorrect. So we've got that. Anything else we need to do with game object? No, so we actually don't ever need to save it, but you know, maybe do more stuff to the game object here, and then we can just return. If we got to this point, it means we did not find a matching image or a color in our array. So let's throw an error for that. So we're going to say debug.log error, no color to prefab found for, and we can do c.toString, which will print out the color. So we're going to put an error in debug log. Now, if we were to run as is, we would actually hit this error a lot. Why is that? Well, because for all of the blank pixels, well, they still exist. These blank pixels are pixels with some kind of color. There actually will be a default sort of inside. This pixel here has to have a color. It'll probably be pure black. It'll probably be 0, 0, 0, but with an alpha value of 0 to say that it's transparent. Now, that will not match our black pixels here because our black pixels are actually set, when we compare it in the map, are set to 0, 0, 0, but with an alpha of 1. So what we don't want to do is spit out an error for here. And in fact, we can bail early. We can say, if this is a transparent pixel, then it's meant to just be empty. So we can do something like if c.alpha is greater than or equal, well, there's no greater than, but I always do this out of paranoia, 255, then we just bail right away. So we don't have to spawn anything for sure. Hey, Simode, thank you very much for the resub. So we can do that. And of course, if you're really paranoid, you could do something like a bigger range or something like that. You know, anything above a certain point, in case there's any sort of weird fuzzy things. But let's take a look at this and see if this works. In theory, this might function. Let's see if we've got any syntax errors. We do. Really? We can't compare? No. There's no equality operator for color 32? Really? Oh, excellent question from Altaj. Isn't alpha the 0 to 1 range? If this were a color as opposed to color 32, that is correct. In fact, all the colors would be from 0 to 1 in a float. Whereas in color 32, which are all bytes that go from 0 to 255. Oh, and you're right, I am going the wrong way around. It actually should be if it's equal to 0, or less than or equal to 0. It's transparent. 255 is fully bright. 0 is the fully down. So this would be the transparent pixel. But really, you can't compare color 32. I mean, we can just manually compare it. It's fine. I'm just kind of surprised. Huh. All right, so we'll just, that's fine. If the red is equal to the red and see, I mean, this is what it would be doing internally. Well, it's not even true. You know, the one thing that really disappointed me, though, I mean, is that there's no way to get the numeric representation. Like, I would just love to get this as a 32-bit value and compare that, because that would get it. But you can't get the raw data out of this, which I find a little bit annoying. You could compare the string, but that would be slower and shittier, so don't do that. So we'll compare the green is equal to dot color dot green and ctp dot color dot blue is equal to the, oops, I'm doing this twice. It should be C is equal to the C dot blue. There you go. So if the reds are the same and the greens are the same and the blues are the same, then they're the same. We could also check for alpha value, which could be another way to flag things. So I guess we'll go ahead and check that as well. Do the alphas match. Then it should be the same color. There's a couple of subs there. Serathwing, thank you very much for the sub. Welcome to the party. And X603, thank you very much for the resub as well. Yeah, Alchemand says great, like a great suggestion, compare their hex. We can't get that, which seems dumb. Like, I would just love to get the raw value, you know, like the C dot raw, C dot hex, nothing. In fact, there's not even a great way, if you want to get the sort of hexadecimal, like HTML style color out of this, you can't. You have to write your own little helper function to convert. C32 needs a wee bit of loving, in my opinion, because internally it must, I'm assuming, must have the hex representation, but I don't know. Anyway, that should hopefully work. C dot equals. Is it possible that they just didn't override the other one? They didn't override or overload the equality sign, but they do have this. That's possible. I guess it's... Oops, I don't want to maximize anymore. No, I don't think so. Because it's saying it's not finding all the black pixels and different things like that, which it clearly must. Okay, none of these are working. It's saying no colored prefab found for RGBA 000255, but... Oh, it's because I have the alpha off for this. Is that the case for all of them? No, just the first one was with no alpha. Let's try that again. Okay, it's not all the way there. Oh, I must have slightly different yellows between my two coins. No, I clearly do. I have two slightly different yellows going on here. But we're most of the way there. Okay, let's try this equality one again. I'll be damned. So equals does work. They didn't overload the equality symbol, which seems like a flaw. So, okay, we can compare that way, which might be doing exactly the same thing as I'm doing here, or might have a faster way. There we go. So if one color equals the other, boom! Taki with the resub. Thank you very much, Taki. Huzzah! And also Heroes tonight. That's right. And Acidic the Pole. Thank you very much for the sub. And Bounding Homo Sapien with the resub. Loving the Project High Rise series. Excellent. Me too. I'm loving that. Omeless Guy. I can never resist you. Thank you very much for the resub as well. Okay, so already, except for the fact that apparently some of my colors don't quite parse, already our little level loading script is working. We're not spawning in the ninja or the coin, so there might be a little something weird going on there with compression or something. Malcolm, thanks for the resub. In this ID, can you middle click the method you're using to see the originating class? What I can do is I can right click and go to declaration. Oh, but we don't actually have the source code for it, so it would go into the assembly browser, because yeah, you actually could. So let's say over here I can right click and say go to declaration, and that would load me there. So yeah, so let's take a look at our error messages here. So we've got a few complaints about a few tiles with, notice the A part of this. There's some weird stuff going on, which I suspect may have to do a little bit with compression. Let's take a look and confirm that in our image, for example, our character over here, it's fine, it's not transparent, it's purely green. And if we look, do I have one that stands out a little greener than others? Because there's definitely some things that are off in here. And this and that. Okay, let me check our level here. Let me force, instead of automatic tree color, I'm going to force you to be RGBA 32-bit. Read-write enabled. No power of 2. I think it was forcing power of 2, which would change things for sure. Aha! Now, the question is, which one was it? There you go. See? Here it doesn't work. But now it does. And why is that? Well, as it turns out, for a lot of modern video cards, it actually doesn't matter quite so much anymore. But still, in a lot of situations, you want your textures to be powers of 2, and ideally even square. But even if they're not square, they should at least be a power of 2, which means to say they should have, say, a width of 32 or 64 or 128, 255, 512, 1024, etc. Video cards and stuff are optimized to work with textures that are in powers of 2, and some of them are optimized not only for power of 2, but specifically square. And by default, Unity will automatically stretch your textures to fit power of 2, because in a 3D situation, it's fine. Your textures are already being stretched and distorted, and if they're at a distance or they're close up, they're getting blown up and shrunk down. So that sort of distortion that happens from stretching your graphics isn't something you ever notice, and you instead gain a crap ton of optimization from having them be a power of 2. So if your image was like 240 pixels wide, it'll just stretch it to be 256. But as a result, some of our pixels in our very precise image here were getting stretched, which means, say this one here was stretching, and the way they stretch it is they add in, kind of like a half gray pixel that is half transparent to sort of blur that edge and whatever. Very bad for what we're trying to do. Fine, and in fact, ideal for most things, but very bad for what we're trying to do. So turn off the non-power of 2. So I don't think the my compression change made a difference, because again, I think if it's automatic true color, everything is good. Everything is good. Let's go to automatic compressed. This might be good, or it might completely F up. It completely effed up. You can see this, the compressed image, half our stuff is missing. And why? It's the same thing. It introduces just a little bit of noise, that JPEGiness, or something else. So automatic true color, no compression. We're good to go. And now, if I bring over the actual game screen over here, I can jump around, I can move. Camera's not following our character right now. We can fix that very easily if we set, say, the camera to be a child of the character and maybe just center it. So now if I move around, whee! And is that right? This doesn't seem right. Oh, no, that's right. I did that there. Oh, that's a little, oh, no, I can do it. I forget too, I can double jump. So you got this, wall climb over here. This is a little wider than I expected when I drew the level, but we've got this, wham! Ding, 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 ding. We've got our turtle enemy, which doesn't do anything. But yeah, the whole level has loaded in. Oh, here's the, nope, not here. Where's the bit we just drew? This is the bit we just drew. So, right here, to there, to up there, to here, and there's our one-up. Bing, 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 bing. No, I didn't animate the characters. It's actually the character that comes included in the 2D platformer controller pack. I don't art, so we have to use the art there. Again, that is an open source. I don't know what the licensing is. I think it's one of the Creative Commons sub-licenses, but check yourself to make sure. But we've got that. So, and what's great about this is, yeah, then you're like, oh man, okay, those areas are too big. It's too wide to jump across here. I misjudged the initial distances. So I'm just gonna grab this, cut it, repaste. Actually, I guess I didn't have to do it that way. Move it there. Actually, the coins are quite small. So if I do something like this, and then grab this part here, and, oh yeah, I'm on the wrong layer, because the way I did it before, and do something like that. There it is, right? And save this, and then just reload. And let's just take a look at what our world looks like. It's like, oh yeah, that's more what I wanted right over there. It's like, you just change the graphics, and it just works. And what's cool, if you combine this, if you recall, well, you may not be watching my Project Porcupine tutorials, but if you are, you know how, right now, if we went and just built this, if we go File, Build Settings, and say we build it for Windows or something like that, and built it, this image, our map, would just be integrated inside of a Unity package bundle thing. It's not really the sort of thing anything can change. But if you have a folder called Streaming Assets, and you put something in there, first of all, if we re-import it, It's going to be a little bit weird. I'm going to break some things here. So if we re-import this image, is it not called streaming assets? I'm just re-importing all, which actually forces Unity to reload. Oh, is it all just one folder name? It might be all one folder name. Ah, it is. That's the problem. I left the space in there. So if I get rid of the space and then re-import this image, aha! You can see now Unity has no idea what to do with this thing. Streaming assets are completely different. They're not normal prefabs or objects that Unity can reference. In fact, this should have broken. Yeah, see, the level no longer has a reference to our texture 2D. And in fact, I can't drag it over there. You're not allowed. But instead, what you can do, I got 6 more minutes before we move over to Kerbal Space Program. Instead, what you can do is you can load things from here. So for load map, we can do something like this. So this is the let's say we have a public string level file name, which defaults to, well, we'll have a default to anything. I'll put it in there. And then we have a string file path, which is equal to application data path plus streaming assets slash plus level file name, like that, right? And then we do system.io.file.read all bytes from file path, like this. So this is going to be an array of bytes, like this. Or actually, I don't have to do that way. I could do, what can I do? I can set level map to be equal to a new texture 2D. You always have to spawn the texture first. It's really weird. And you have to spawn it with some size, which is irrelevant. This is a very bizarre thing. I know I'm rushing and not really explaining very well. And then we say level map dot load image from the bytes. And now level map should have the data from there. Read the image data from the file in streaming assets, not steaming assets. Keep doing that. Like every time I make the typo. Every time. So we're going to comment this one out. Oops. And texture 2D level map equals this. So now if we go here, we got streaming assets. I think, if I've done it correctly, if we hit play, no, access is denied. Oh, it doesn't actually have a file name. Right. Oh, and this is a PSD, which it shouldn't be. So let me move this back over here. You get re-imported. We're going to reopen this. I'm going to save it as a PNG. You don't want a JPEG or anything like that because it'll do that JPEG compression, which will mess things up. Where if you use a PNG, either variant, it should preserve the pixels exactly how as drawn. We'll use the 128-bit because it'll be a little smaller. I don't know. PNG 24 should also be fine. So I'm going to just save this. Let me put it in the right folder here. No. Because at load time, you can only load JPEGs or PNGs. You definitely cannot load Photoshop files at runtime. That's something that has to be processed ahead of time. You wouldn't want to because it would be too big and too slow. Platformer image from map, assets, streaming assets, level 1-1 PNG. Save that. So now if we go back in here, there's our asset over there. And we tell our level that the file name is level 1-1.png. Obviously, you could also just read this folder and load in everything that way. So let's hit play and... Now, the great thing about this, what's amazing about this, is if we go build settings, I build the game, add this scene, build for Windows. So let's add a folder here for builds. platformer.exe. Save that. Should take no time at all to produce. And it'll open the folder afterwards. This is going to be very exciting. Is everyone pumped? This is going to be awesome. Okay, so now this is the folder that gets produced. Okay, platformer.exe. It's got the platformer data folder, which is always present on your Unity projects. So one of the ways you can tell if a game is a Unity game, just open it up and see if it's got a whatever underscore data folder. And here it's got a bunch of assets and things like that, and folders you can't really modify. It's like weird. How do you open it up? But if you go into streaming assets, you can find just a PNG by itself. So let me open just this PNG here in the Photoshop. So this is the PNG from our streaming assets, and let me make a change, right? So let me open up the brush, do some black pixels, and we'll, right over here, we'll draw another little sort of bar like that, okay? So I'm going to just save this. All I've done here is modified the PNG. I'm not going to Unity. I'm not doing anything like that. And then I'm just going to go into my folder here and go back to the build. All I'm going to do is run the exe. And what it's going to do is it's going to grab, it's going to just read that PNG, which I have just modified. Oh, all right, the camera's not linked to our character. Poop. All right. But it would load in the new thing. I forgot about that. So that's unfortunate. But the important thing to note, and I won't be able to show it very well, is that this is the level that would get loaded. And so people can now mod your game, or they can make their own levels. Especially if right now we have in our the level, we have a fixed field for the level file name, but we don't have to have that. Instead, over here, we do something like load all level names. So read the list of files from, say, streaming assets / levels / startup PNG, right? Find all the PNGs in there. The player will progress through the levels alphabetically, right? So as long as you name things level 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, then 2-1, 2-2, etc., you'll just load it in there. So people can just add more stuff in there. Or maybe what you're going to do is you're going to have a button that you can open a level of your choice. It just goes in there, shows you almost a dialog box, like a file dialog box, which you'd have to make in Unity in the UI system. That is just a listing of all those files. You click, you pick one. That's the level that gets loaded, right? So all of a sudden you're passing a string, right? Level to load here instead, or something of that nature. It's like, oh, mind blown? Mind blown? In 1 hour, you make an infinitely moddable platformer. Drop the mic. Any questions? We're going to move on to Kerbal Space Program in a moment here, but any questions about what we did over here? And who was that with the resub? That's Walds. Thank you very much, Walds. Mind blown, yeah. In other words, Super Mario Maker should have been produced in about a month, since all the assets already exist. All they needed to do was build the online platform, which is not an easy thing to do. With a team about 20 people should be, yeah. So there's a little bit more to it for like really complex things, for the ability to have, multiple physics and things like that. The online platforms are no joke. You got to test the shit out of everything for the online things, but yeah. Yeah, this will get uploaded to the Quill18 Creates YouTube channel if you missed any of it. And all the code will be available for download. If you go over to quill18.com, you can find a link there to all my Unity tutorials and all the downloads and everything like that. So you'll be able to get all the files over there. Why no recursion? I don't think we need that. Is it possible to create a random generating platformer? In fact, some do, right? If you think about, oh god, like Spelunky. I mean, that's really a randomly generated platformer, and there's a lot like that. Hey, Dark. The tricky part for that is making sure that your platformer never traps the player. Right, either because the player has a way to like destroy walls, or make jumps that seem otherwise impossible, or you have this whole like sanity thing put in, where after you sort of like do your basic level generation, Then you go by and verify that everything is legal and accessible, and if not, have some way to fix it. Or another way to do it is, if your level is, say, this big, you have it composed of, like, say, 4x4 chunks, and each one of those chunks is taken from a pre-existing chunk that is designed to link together very well. So it's not, truly random in a sense. That's kind of what XCOM 2 did with its level design. Hey, Thornsworth, their level designs are, they're random, but they're made of, like, predefined blocks that link together so that you don't end up with, like, a dumb situation where everything's just a dead end. You can never move anywhere. So there you go. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, Poe, yeah, don't worry. It'll be on the VOD. Again, if you miss the programming parts and you want to see about that, then you will have to go to youtube.com/Quill18creates. I'll try to get up there fast. And other than that, we're going to move on to the gaming. How long have I been doing Unity development? Quite a while. Definitely, I mean, since version 3, which I think was, like, the first time they really, hit the scene as this, like, they have this free version and things like that. It's pretty good. Original XCOM, yeah, was built the same way. There you go. Spelunky did the same thing. Blog post about it. Excellent. That's really helpful. Yeah, Torchlight and Diablo, and I believe Path of Exile all use those predefined chunk things for different rules. Well, Path of Exile, that was great. One of the reasons I was on the radar, that game was on the radar, is because long ago they were posting to the Reddit game dev, and they actually posted a video about, well, I don't know if they posted it or someone else posted it to Reddit, but they put on their YouTube channel their map generation. And basically what they did is they sort of took the map, they sort of chose random starting and end points, then drew random paths, then added noise. And that was just like sort of just this graph. And then what they did is take these predefined chunks that would fit in this graph. Like, okay, this chunk here we need something that has an exit to the north, south, and east. And they go through and, like, grab one of those chunks that fits that sort of thing and drops it in there, and so on and so forth. So it's actually quite cool. Can you show what you've done? Oh yeah, so if you missed it, we'll do it. I'll show you one more time here. If we hit play. So the big deal here is that we have an image that we drew in Photoshop that is just sitting here, that at runtime now, we look in streaming assets, we grab this folder, this PNG file over here. So I still have the original PSD over here, but it's the PNG file here that we load in, and we just read it at runtime, and depending on what color of each pixel, it's associated with a particular block because of a map that we did. Oh, I'm not setting, that's what I forgot to do. When we load in the map and we spawn the tile, GameObject.transform.setParent to this.transform. Whoops. There you go. So we want the tiles we spawn, we want them to belong to us. And one of the great reasons you do that, anytime you do anything like this where you spawn things dynamically, have it be parented to something, because then you can hide them. Very convenient. And it also means that our empty map thing actually runs. If for some reason we had a button to, like, reload the map, well, first we run empty map, and all it does is it goes through all of our little children here and deletes them and cleans them up, which is a great thing to do. And then, yeah, now what I can do is drop the main camera, hook it up to the Ninja, which there's a million different ways you want to do it. Like, you might not actually want to have the camera linked directly to your game object in your particular game, because you might want to have the camera sort of follow a bit more. Like in Mario Brothers, the camera doesn't go up and down when you jump. And in fact, there's a little bit of play as you go left and right where you have to move a little bit before the camera moves, the screen moves. But you can do that. And again, if you've got really big levels, or you're running on some sort of platform where you have limited memory, or your level's insane, or different things like that, you actually might not want to read in all the pixels. You may only want to read in the pixels that are within this border. This is the camera frame here, right? There's no reason to have spawned anything that exists outside the camera frame yet. But you do have to track if things have been created or destroyed. So you might not want to despawn things. If you're the sort of game where you can run backwards and forwards, you can just not despawn things. Or you might want to have a different category for things that can be interacted with versus not. Or, I mean, there's a million different ways you can choose to optimize it, but there you go. This doesn't have the little extra line because I didn't edit the one that was in this folder. There you go, a little wall jump, drop down through there. I didn't get all the coins though. Could go back and probably do that. Let's see. Because we've got the wall jump and we've also got double jumping. But there you go. Pick up all... Oops. Oh my god, I'm super bad at platformers. There you go. Grab all those. Boom. And voila. And then the snail doesn't do anything. leave that as an exercise to the viewer. All right, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to move over to Kerbal Space Program. And if you do have any more questions, I'll try to address them in the break. We're going to take 2 minutes while I switch over games. Actually, it's going to take a while to boot up Kerbal Space Program with all the mods, but we'll see how it goes. Should I have a bed block too? I don't know what you mean. Like bedrock kind of thing? Alright, as the camera shifts in the direction you move to show you more of where you're going. That's why, yeah, when you change direction, it shifts quickly. Yeah, so it's always trying to show you a little further ahead than behind, which is kind of cool. How are the pixels colors tied to different blocks in the game? Basically, we just set up this little, it's not really a custom inspector, but we set up a custom object type or custom class called color to prefab, which was set to serializable, and we just made sure that there was a public array belonging to the level loader script, and we can populate it. And if ever you get more colors, then you just increase that count and then add more things like that. And then I just loop through this, but if you had lots and lots and lots of these, then it would be inefficient to just, because I loop through to find the first one with the right color. Ideally, what you do is a dictionary which maps from a color to whatever, and that would be a lot faster. But, or would you? Well, you'd have some other way of organizing it. That would be very important. You actually couldn't use a dictionary because the key's a little bit annoying to look up by. I guess you could do a lookup by string at that point, and it wouldn't be too bad. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up. So let me take a short break. We're gonna get Kerbal Space Program up and running. We will be right back. Hey, thank you to all the June patrons who support these videos through July and early August, and especially these Mike Check supporters. We've got Steven Stagger again, and Michael McClintock again, and Kale the Quick again. Lots of agains. Drazion, Adjective, Jason Yanity, Wes Olenbeving, Craig Mortel, Neil Blakey Milner, Speedy Savant, Valiant Cake Fiend, Aaron Toyson, Marius Fieldvold, Jan Torre Vel, Ole Peter Talgo, Julien Auger Lafont, Petrie Michaela, and absolutely everyone who has watched, shared, favorited, and subscribed. Thanks for continuing to make this a reality, and I'll see you next time.